collapsed. Does that make sense to you?
Peter, it's probably both, to tell you the truth. There were cranes working on the southern tower, and they may have pulled down part of that, and there was a fire, as I reported earlier, inside that structure. But in addition to whatever is happening to that southern tower skeleton, there is also a concern among authorities here about other buildings being in danger of collapse.
Number on the number of buildings which are in danger have been affected. I don't expect you to be particularly accurate, but we did hear from one doctor who'd been in on the inside. He said he thought he'd heard that 40 buildings had been affected.
When I was inside, Peter, I didn't see that many, but I certainly saw 5 or 6 which had such severe damage I could never imagine them ever being rebuilt. And you don't know what's happening inside those buildings, even as you're looking at them from the outside. But clearly, Peter, even beyond that square right around the World Trade Center, there were buildings even farther out with windows blown out and other kinds of damage.
Thank you, George. As a reminder of the atmosphere down there, as you were talking, a young woman walked past George and turned around the corner, of course, wearing a face mask, as a lot of people are in downtown Manhattan today, because the air is just poisonous with dust and soot and everything else that has just simply been the result of this explosion. Got a couple minutes before the top of the hour to hear quickly from Betsy Stark on the status of the financial markets generally. Betsy, people in the United States today who wanted to trade or have the need to trade? Oh, it is. Okay. Well, should we hang on for a second then? Okay. My apologies. Betsy Stark has prepared a piece for us, and we won't get it in just before we break and re-invite many stations to join us from around the country in terms of their local news. But let me then tell you also that the Secretary of State spoke today at considerable length about what the United States has done in terms of reaching out to communicate with the rest of the world. He's talked to about everybody. He talked to the Secretary General of the United Nations. There'd been a UN resolution in support of the United States. Very interesting thing in terms of the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, the Western Alliance, which the U.S. leads, and the other members of the NATO alliance had agreed today in invoking one of the articles of the alliance, Article 5, that an attack on the United States would be regarded as an attack on the alliance as a whole, raising a whole new list of questions about what happens if the United States is able to identify at some point that some government has been a participant in all this. I apologize. Mr. Powell also talked to various leaders around the world. He talked to Mr. Putin, as did the President Bush talk to President Putin in Russia today. He talked to the Israeli Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon. He talked to Yasser Arafat, the President of the Palestinian Authority. Very relevant conversations given all of the violence in that today. The only person who we've notably not talked to, we could tell, was General Pervez Musharraf, who is the military leader in Pakistan, and there is some serious question now about the sentiments in Pakistan tonight vis-a-vis the Taliban in next-door Afghanistan and support for any moves like this, but it's a little too early to nail any of this down. But we are going to pause for a few seconds now to allow local stations who are going to go to their local news to do that, and our coverage here will continue.
This is a News Source 13 special report.
Good evening, I'm Don Alhart. We continue our special report letting you know what is happening here in the Rochester area and how Rochester is responding to the tragedy in New York City and in Washington. America continuing to show its strength tonight, one day after the terrorist attacks in New York City. Rochester is responding. News Source 13's Jane Flash has seen the devastation firsthand, now joining us live from New Jersey with what she saw today. Jane.
Don, an incredible sight. We are just north of the George Washington Bridge. As we cross that bridge today, the only thing I can think of to compare it to in a way is Niagara Falls. But instead of that spray of water up in the air, as you got a little closer, you realized it was dust and debris. Then you realized the total devastation of what that site now looks like. That was the site that greeted Rochester volunteers who have come all this way to help.
just made a big circle.
We're apparently having some problems with Jane. We'll try to get back to her as soon as we can. Let me just bring you up to date on some of the statistics. Thousands of people feared dead, yet the exact numbers won't be known for some time. Mayor Rudy Giuliani has confirmed 55 deaths so far. Clearly, that is just a tiny fraction of those who have been killed. At the Pentagon, officials have recovered 80 bodies, and we learned now that 259 uniformed police officers and firefighters remain unaccounted for. Well, two brothers from Pittsford are praying that their father is not one of those casualties. Tom Duffy, who works for a local insurance brokerage firm, was scheduled to be inside one of the towers yesterday morning. His family has not heard from him since the attack. Duffy's son spoke with News Source 13's Krista Miranda as they wait for word.
I have a bad feeling about the whole situation and just his location in the building. It scares us. I honestly don't have a very positive outlook at this point.
52-year-old Tom Duffy was supposed to be on the 99th floor of Tower 1 yesterday morning for a 10 a.m. meeting.
I am hopeful. I'm trying to not get my hopes extremely high and not, get too down. Trying to just go with it minute by minute and see what we can come up with.
The two brothers, along with their mother, have been calling New York City hospitals, leaving descriptions of their dad, trying desperately to find anyone who might have seen him. One thing they've stopped doing is watching television coverage from New York City. The sounds of police sirens and the images of bloodied victims fleeing from the scene is too much to watch.
Especially when they keep showing the images of the planes flying into the buildings and people holding on the windows and jumping out of windows. It's a lot to bear, considering that our father was there at the same time.
The family has no plans to go to New York right now. They say they'll have more luck in their search away from the chaos. Instead, they'll stay here and hope they hear good news soon.
I love him, and if he doesn't come back, we're just gonna miss him tremendously. But he was a great man.
The Duffys say the hardest part is knowing that it may be days or weeks before they hear any sort of word from the scene. Maybe the most amazing part of this story, though, is that in their concern and their confusion, they've still found time to express sympathies for the other people around the country who are in the same positions as they are. They say there are thousands of families out there just like them who are going through the same thing tonight.
Listening to him talk today, it's one of those things. We take everyone around us for granted every day, our family, our co-workers. All of a sudden, something like this puts them in an entirely different light than we perhaps sometimes need to think about.
They were saying today they're remembering times with their father playing football or talking about girls when they were growing up and things, just memories like that. And they are still hopeful in some ways. So there's just waiting for word, waiting to see.
All right, a lot of people supporting them here as well. Thank you, Kristen. Also waiting for word, a father from Mendon looking for his son. 24-year-old Brandon Buchanan worked on the 104th floor of one of the World Trade Towers. Buchanan is a McQuaid Jesuit High School graduate. Students and teachers there are aware he is missing. They are praying he's alive.
I think for adolescents, it's very helpful if they can relate to the person by seeing them. I think it's very important. The second reason I put on the board is every time we've had a student tragedy, the thing that we do at McQuaid, that we do the best at McQuaid, is we pray for the person and their family. And it gives us a focus as we pray every day in the morning announcements and then in class. We pray for the person, and that way we can see who we're praying for. So that's why it's important to have a visual image of Brandon at this time as we wait and kind of hope.
The last anyone heard from Brandon was 8:48 a.m. yesterday when he called his girlfriend. The call came just 3 minutes after the plane crashed into the North Tower. Timing saved a young Rochester man who works at the World Trade Center. His mother says his train was late by just a few minutes. Any other day, he would have been inside already on the 91st floor. 24-year-old Joey Jones called his mom to let her know he was alive yesterday morning. Rosa Jones is a cook at a daycare in Brighton. Joey told her that he saw the second plane crash into the Trade Center as he was coming out of the train station.
I think he's more in shock. He's like, everybody I work with, I don't know if they're all dead or what. But he says, I haven't heard from anybody.
Rosa says Joey is terribly worried about his friends who were inside the towers, as we know that rescue effort continuing at this time. Rochester's airport will remain closed for now. A lot of people wondering, though, when it's going to reopen, and then when it does, it will not be business as usual. News Source 13's Patrice Walsh has been at the airport today. A lot of developments, both nationally, a lot of that pertaining to us here as well, Patrice, as we look toward the time when it's going to reopen.
And everybody's wondering the same thing, Don. And right now, they're not being allowed to open. As you know, the Transportation Secretary has said no air travel, and that will continue, we're told, at least until tomorrow. We're told no flights will likely leave here until tomorrow afternoon. One development that is new, though, there is a plane. There are actually 4 planes that were diverted here because of the attack. One of them, you can see on the runway behind us. It's a United Airlines flight that was actually bound for Boston. When the terrorist attack happened, it was diverted here. The 50 passengers, we're told, are still stranded here, but that plane may be allowed to be moved tonight. Of course, it would be moved empty, moved back to Boston. That could happen, we're told, tonight. Of course, the reason for the delay in resuming air travel is to make sure all of the new FAA safety requirements are in place. The ticket counters are dark, the terminal empty. The only noise inside the Rochester airport was the sound of barking dogs.
That's it. Leave it.
The FAA required all airports to do a sweep of terminals and all aircraft with bomb dogs before allowing them to reopen. Security sweeps like that using canine dogs may become a permanent fixture at Rochester's airport.
Right now, we're looking to see if we could provide K9 units, and right now we're making the assumption that we have to provide them on a daily basis. And
other new security measures required by the FAA include no curbside check-in. Passengers will be screened twice. Crew members will also be screened by airline management, and federal marshals may be aboard all flights.
now, obviously, putting federal marshals on aircraft, and if they had been on those aircraft yesterday, you might have had a different result.
All of these safety measures will require more patience from passengers. And the airport manager here tells us things won't return to normal for at least another day.
More than likely, if the system starts up again, it's going to be tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening, at least in Rochester.
Now, that was the airport manager, Terry Slaybaugh. We spoke to him just a few minutes ago, and things still stand as they were. He tells us, though, he's talked to the airline carriers all afternoon. They are anxious to begin flying again. Delta has told him they are 70% operational and ready to fly. But right now, Don, safety, the biggest concern. They're not letting anything out of here until they're given the word from federal authorities.
And we understand, too, and here in Rochester, being a smaller airport, a lot of us accompany people to the actual gate when they're going to fly. From what I understand today, at a lot of the airports, and probably here too, only the passengers themselves from now on will be permitted that far. If you don't have a ticket, a boarding pass, you're not going to get as far as you used to get.
That's correct. And you remember, Don, that was instituted a few years ago, too. We went through that where you could only get past the gate if you had a ticket.
Right.
So we've actually been through that before. This time, though, I think this is going to stick. I think you're going to have to get used to a lot of new requirements. You're going to have to get here a lot earlier, but it is for your own safety.
And just looking at our airport today, and I don't travel that much, but I can picture O'Hare, just like Rochester today, totally empty of people. A sight we don't see. It gives us all a little pause to reflect on what's happened.
Yeah, we were inside today, Don, and it's an eerie feeling. Yeah. It really is.
All right, Patrice Walsh with 13 Live out at the airport tonight. The airports may have no traffic at this particular time, but the American Red Cross has so much traffic for blood donors, they had to actually turn away many walk-ins today. Our medical reporter, Liz Bonus, joining us now from the Blood Center over on Prince Street, where once again, Rochesterians rolling up their sleeves and showing they're willing to help.
The response here, Don, has just been amazing. Within the last 24 hours, the Red Cross has collected so much blood. It's the same amount it would normally take them 5 days to collect. Much of that blood is already on the way to that disaster site in New York City. Now, they told us today one of the reasons they always call for help when the supply gets below 3 days is for times just like this. It takes about 48 hours to process and ship out what gets collected here. And in disaster times like these, they need that backup.
But it's important to remember that this is why we talk about having a supply on hand. This is why we talk about a strategic reserve, is because incidents like this cannot be predicted, and that's why steady donations are needed every day.
Now, it's not just blood they need, but it's also money. Today, they received several donations, more than $100,000 from businesses and the United Way. You see here, we also have an emergency blood drive scheduled for this Friday from 10 to 6 at the Dome in Henrietta. Now, what they plan to do is sort of put together all their staff for that blood drive. We do not expect to have the same wait times that we've had that day throughout the last couple of days. So they're telling people we still need blood, we still need money, but they're not taking any more walk-ins today. They are asking you to either stop by on Friday or call ahead to make an appointment.
So if we want to show up on Friday, we can call and set a particular time to do that?
They are taking both appointments for that day and walk-ins that day as well.
All right, Liz Bonus, our medical reporter down at the Red Cross, thank you. And we'll check in again as this continues through the week. You know, this national crisis has people yearning for a way to help. Proof of that in our community, not only with the Red Cross drive, but another way coming this morning when the call went out for bedding supplies for New York City police officers and firefighters. As News Source 13's Doug Embers tells us, that call was answered. Was it ever?
That's a boy. Good job. Thank you.
These people had an aching need to do something.
I thought, what could I do?
A call for help this morning was like salve for fragile and frightened souls.
It just seemed for a while that one thing after the other was going on.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
New York Police Supply in Irondequoit got the call from New York City this morning. Cots and blankets and pillows were needed so New York City police and firefighters could rest between their shifts. Sir, what you got there?
Oh, we got cots for New York City. I called New York City back and told him what was coming, and he said it's unbelievable. He says we've got cops and rescue workers sleeping on the streets. They're not going home between shifts.
Cohn thought he might get a pile of cots and pillows. Instead, people brought a truckload, then another truckload. 4 in all. The tractor trailers donated by Wegmans. This is an incredible display of how we can come together, of American spirit, perhaps. Take Gloria Johnson, this lady right here, who was driving by today, saw all of this, pulled over, got out, and went to work.
Helping myself by getting out of the house, doing something to help someone else.
There was a flood of feelings here today. Patriotism, of course, hope to counter sadness. Strangers became fast friends, talking about how their lives and how America had changed so much in just a day.
Today, I think we all realize we're one, and that's Americans. Like there is no nationality or prejudice. We just all band together and defend our home, which is America.
It was an incredible flood of feeling at that event today. Some footnotes from my experience there, from one woman who donated. I heard her story of how she and her husband became engaged atop the World Trade Center. Another woman brought a blanket made from parachute material. The parachute was used by her own father, who was a paratrooper in World War II. And several people told me how the drive reminded them of World War II supply drives in the 40s. One saying he felt the same spirit, and he was hoping it would help us get through all this.
We seem to find that time and time again in this community, people just wanting to know what they can do to help and responding quickly whenever they can.
They had to do this in such a hurry. They had one truck, Wegmans had given one truck. All of a sudden there was this outpouring of support. They needed 4 trucks in a hurry. They said it's very important. Your good intentions can go to waste if you are not organized and do not have a recipient on the other end. For instance, they needed a police escort to New York just to get into the city to make sure that stuff gets donated. It should be either there or on its way right now.
All right, thank you, Doug.
All right.
We want to take a moment to talk about the world of sports. The world of sports stepping a little bit to the sidelines, of course, because of the terrorist attack. Our sports director, Mike Catalana, joining us now with more. A lot of people are curious as to what is the proper time to delay things, when they're going to start up, and how that's all going to take place.
And you know, Don, a lot of fans are worried about that, but also a lot of people that are involved in the games themselves. The games are really not going on right now, and that certainly is appropriate. The question on many fans' minds is, when will they start playing again? Major League Baseball has canceled all games tonight, and tomorrow at the least. They could resume Friday. Now the NFL has a tough decision to make. Will they play this Sunday? News Source 13's Tracy Bush is live outside Wilson Stadium, where the Bills practice today. Tracy?
Well, Mike, the Bills tried to keep to their normal schedule today, but they don't know if they'll play on Sunday in Miami. The NFL has yet to make that decision, but it could come as early as tonight. Now, at the end of practice today, the players came together to say a prayer for the victims of yesterday's attacks. Some of the players we talked to felt the games should be canceled out of respect for the victims, while others felt football could be a diversion for the country. The head coach says the team will go along with whatever the president and the league decide.
If our country believes and our government believes that it's safe to play these ball games, then that's our part. That's what we should do. If the league says that it's safe to play these games this weekend, then that's what we should do. If that's our part, that's what we do. That's what our job is.
Now, one piece of good news coming out of Orchard Park today, it appears none of the players had relatives involved in yesterday's attacks. Mike?
Tracy, I'm curious if the league does decide to cancel the games for this weekend. Have you heard any provisions on whether they would make up the games or not?
It appears they will not make up the games, and the season would be reduced to a 15-game season.
All right, Tracy. Well, hopefully we will know tonight, and then we will update that for you tonight at 11 o'clock. How are the other sports dealing with things? Well, as we already mentioned, Major League Baseball postponed. Syracuse University football scheduled to be home this weekend. We'll delay that game with East Carolina for 2 weeks. Some NCAA football games, like the SEC and the Big 12 and the Big 10, will play, but the ACC and the Big East have canceled games for this weekend. All the local teams, Don, are playing this weekend. Some other sports to tell you about as far as local college football, they will play this weekend. Some other things to tell you about. The Rhinos playoff game that was scheduled for the 22nd has now been pushed back to the 29th because every game has been delayed, and the PGA Championship, the events going on for this weekend, have also been postponed. NASCAR canceled their qualifying, but they will race this weekend in New Hampshire. So each sport trying to decide what they feel is appropriate.
Trying to get back in business and do it with the proper amount of time.
And I think we will know about the NFL sometime tonight, at the latest tomorrow.
All right, thank you, Mike.
All right.
I want to pass along, too, the major financial markets remain closed today in the wake of yesterday's terrorist attack. Wall Street is hoping to resume trading as early as Friday and no later than Monday. Both the New York Exchange and NASDAQ are working together to reach a common resumption of trading. That from Wall Street. People talking about the weather. Somebody stopped me today and said, you know, people are always talking about the weather, just to fill a little time. What's it going to do? And asking about it. And he said, sadly, we have something else to talk about, but people are still curious about the weather and what it's going to do.
Well, and certainly I think folks are very thankful that the weather has cooperated down in New York City. You got a lot of people on the streets out there, and it looks like, well, they had a good day today in terms of the weather. It looks like the dry weather is going to continue down in New York City. It looks like another 36 hours, maybe 48 hours, and then towards the weekend there is going to be the threat of some showers and thunderstorms for some of the folks down there and also for us. Take a look at the satellite time lapse here, and of course, as Don was mentioning, we had a terrific day out there. Lots of sunshine, comfortable temperatures. I think our high temperature today was up to about 80 degrees or so. Now you can see just a few patchy clouds just to the north here. There's nothing down through New York City, as we mentioned, nothing really through the Rochester area, but you can see the leading edge of some clouds here. That's going to probably be our next change. That's the front that is beginning to approach the western New York area. The front will reach us first, certainly before New York City, and we'll get some of those rain showers, we think, in here by tomorrow. Let's take a look at live neighborhood weather. Here's a look at our temperatures across the area, and it certainly did warm up, feeling certainly summer-like. These temperatures are warmer than we normally expect for this time of the year. The city's still up to about 80, 81 degrees. A lot of the surrounding area now down into the 70s. One example out in Leroy. Temperatures at 77 degrees, and it looks like we're going to find fine weather this evening. You got any plans through tonight? The weather generally is going to cooperate. Really looking good. Let's take a look at the bigger picture here. This is the northeast view, and you can actually pick up where the front is located. Look at this band of clouds and rain showers here through lower Michigan. That's the leading edge of some of this cool air, and eventually this is going to be the significant change that's going to come in our weather. This is where the front is located. On the other side of the front, temperatures drop significantly. So let's take a look at the forecast map, and we're going to put things into motion now. I think we got mild weather tonight, but as the front comes through tomorrow, the temperatures will start to drop as we go through the day. There's going to be the risk of a couple of rain showers here locally during the day. Rain showers eventually getting into the New York City area, we think, by tomorrow night and into Friday. And we're talking about some very cool weather. How cool? Some of the coolest weather of the season. In fact, there's the possibility, small possibility, by Saturday morning, some of the valleys south of Rochester, we could be talking about our first areas of frost across the region. So temperatures could actually drop into the 30s south of Rochester. Here's a look at our weather forecast for tonight. We're looking at fair skies early on. The weather is going to be fine. Clouds will increase, we think, later tonight. The temperature down to about 57 degrees or so. Heading into tomorrow again, there comes the change. We're going to lose our nice weather. We're looking at mostly cloudy skies. There's going to be the chance of a passing shower through the day. Look at the temperature there now. We start out in the mid-60s, but it's going to be dropping. So by the end of the day, we're going to be heading into the 50s. The extended outlook into Friday, October-like weather, only in the 50s, chance of a shower. Saturday, still a possibility of some patchy frost. And then finally some warmer weather, we think, going into Sunday and into Monday.
All right, and thank you, Glenn. We want to remind everyone, of course, to stay tuned to ABC and to News Source 13. We'll have continuing coverage. You can also log on to our website, as you see there, iknowrochester.com, for any airline information, local prayer services, contact numbers in New York City, and blood drives. A number of services taking place tonight. The Victory Baptist Church, I know in Henrietta, having a service at 7 o'clock and having counselors available as well if you want to stop in churches throughout the community doing as well. Finally tonight, we look at the bright spots of patriotism, those that bring us together during times of crisis. The emotion came to me as I lowered the flag in front of my house to half-staff today. Suddenly, the images from yesterday came all at once. The pain and suffering of those who were injured or died. The last thoughts of those aboard the doomsday flights of hijacked airliners. And those now waiting for the simple phone call that says, "Mom, Dad, I'm okay." I thought of our flag much of this day. I've heard of those buying flags today in escalating numbers. We saw a tattered flag on a town truck in Greece. I grabbed the camera and almost drove off Route 590, trying to catch Old Glory atop a cement truck just ahead. Flags at half-staff remind us of yesterday's unthinkable attack. The flag itself reminds us we are one nation under God, indivisible. A bright spot of patriotism rising out of the tragic dust of terrorism.
Smoke and ash, it says, but gases, plastic, and asbestos have created a health problem in this part of New York City, and it is particularly of concern for young people and older people, and they advise that people be cautious. One thing that has resumed, Peter, is the enormous job of removing the debris from the two towers. There's been a steady parade of dump trucks through that area today. There are empty ones lined up all the way north on West Street. As the empty ones arrive, they are being filled because the debris, mostly chunks of concrete and pieces of steel, are hampering the search and rescue operation. And there is so much of it, Peter, that it is not only being taken to landfills, but is also being shipped from here on the barge. And one grim reminder of how that operation may be going, a short time ago, we saw a boat traveling across the Hudson River from the World Trade Center, carrying bodies destined for, or at least one body, destined for the temporary morgue at Liberty Island.
Thanks very much, Bob Jameson in Lower Manhattan. Real life, it does intrude, does it not? Hollywood executives, sometimes difficult to impress if you're a member of the public and you disagree with what they're doing in terms of taste, have now postponed or agreed to postpone at least 2 movies and considered rescheduling other films and television shows that involve terrorist plots against American citizens. Warner Brothers said today it is going to indefinitely withhold the release of Arnold Schwarzenegger's latest film, Collateral Damage, in which a terrorist bombs a Los Angeles skyscraper, which was to have been released to the public just about a month from now. And Disney's Touchstone Pictures postponed the September 21st release of a comedy with Tim Allen called Big Trouble, in which one scene involved a bomb on a plane. Both of these studios, I'm quoting the entertainment writer on the Associated Press. Both studios said they acted out of respect for the victims of the terror attacks, and Warner Brothers said it would retrieve all commercials, posters, and ads for Collateral Damage and discontinue or disconnect its website, all of which feature phony newspaper headlines about a fictional attack. Real life does intrude. Martha Raddatz at the State Department? Okie dokie. All right. President Bush, as you know, has, at least as we've said, wanted to pay a visit to the Pentagon, and he has indeed gone to the Pentagon today, and we expect pictures very shortly of the President at the Pentagon, but Terry Moran, our White House correspondent, can give us the interim news in the meantime. Terry?
Well, Peter, the President did leave for the Pentagon some time ago. In fact, the motorcade I was looking at was actually Vice President Cheney's motorcade. He has now left the White House. The President went to the Pentagon. We will see those pictures shortly. He toured the damage side by side with Secretary Rumsfeld. He said he was saddened by what he saw, overwhelmed by the destruction, but determined that America would not be defeated by this. He's en route back to the White House, and this is a symbolic visit. It's also something we are told personally he very much wanted to do, and he has also been managing the affairs of state on this very busy day, reaching out to overseas leaders, trying to build, in an echo of what his father did during the Gulf War, a coalition against terrorism is the way officials are putting it. He is very aggressively, very actively reaching out to try to enlist other nations in the American response to these events, although one official said to me, they're enlisting themselves. Now, what exactly that will mean, we don't know yet. When asked whether the United States will seek operational support, cooperation in some kind of military response, or just moral and political support, we're told that's just too far down the road. But right now, Secretary of State Powell and the President himself trying to build a coalition, as I say, in an echo of the way his father handled the Gulf War.
Okay, thanks very much, Terry. It's interesting because just before this, and who knows what will happen in the days ahead, it was widely believed that if an American president tried to get a Gulf War-like coalition together, as it did at the time of the Gulf War, it would be impossible to muster the support of certainly countries in the Middle East and also some in Europe to join the United States in any actions in the Middle East. And it will be interesting in the days ahead to see if that actually changed. As we look at the damage at the Pentagon, we just keep getting a series of pieces of information which tell us just how long this is going to go on. Federal disaster officials today say they are clearly preparing for a massive months plural, long search, rescue, and cleanup operation at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And while nobody is ever able to put an accurate financial figure on the cost in an event like this, we hear people quoting various amounts just at the World Trade Center of $5 billion or $25 billion. But looking back at the Los Angeles riots, which the Associated Press has done, we're reminded that in 1992, the cost of recovering from those riots in Los Angeles was $775 million, or $1 billion in today's dollars. And the federal disaster relief is huge. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has deployed 3,000 workers, just that agency, at both the Pentagon and in New York. World News is coming along in many parts of the country. Our coverage will, of course, continue. It's been 33 hours since the terrible and unprecedented attack on the United States. There is, as we've said, an enormous search and rescue operation and enormous and intense criminal investigation. And we're just beginning to understand the extent of the catastrophe.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Well, of course, it is part of our continuing coverage, and we'll try to do, as I said, something of an ordered world news tonight, which will last not for half an hour, but for an hour in many parts of the country. Today we have somewhat of a clearer sense of the scope of what is involved in recovering from this catastrophe which occurred in the country yesterday. We have significant new details to report. Late this afternoon in Lower Manhattan, you heard just a few minutes ago, those of you who are on the full network, about the remaining portions of the South Tower at the World Trade Center coming down. This caused a serious measure of concern, one could add panic, in certain parts of southern New York because people did not understand completely what was happening. But what you're looking at here is the evacuation of the rescue workers today, this afternoon, in that particular area. Now, the White House spokesman Ari Fleischer has said today that the White House and Air Force One were also targets. We'll investigate that. ABC News has learned that investigators believe they've identified all 12 of the people who hijacked the 4 planes. And several people in Florida and in the Boston area have been detained and certainly questioned in connection with the attacks. At the Pentagon today, this was a very moving scene this afternoon. Rescue workers unfurled a large American flag from the roof of the building, their way, in part, we think, of welcoming President Bush, who paid a visit to this afternoon. We'll have that. The president, in a meeting of his cabinet this morning, said the U.S. was committed to a monumental struggle of good versus evil, and it is not yet clear how the U.S. is going to respond or against whom. As you have seen repeatedly throughout the day, a cloud still hangs over Lower Manhattan tonight and just south of our newsroom here. A few people have been pulled from the rubble that was the World Trade Center. The news from there, we have to tell you, you can look at it and understand, is very grim indeed. We went to the scene today, and with hope, one doctor told us, and he came out with a feeling of despair. Many people are believed dead. Nobody wants to put a number on it. We know how many people worked in the area. We do know that the numbers at the Pentagon are lower than certainly were estimated in the public arena yesterday, and that is as far as we got with those numbers, but we'll come back to them. Throughout the day, we have been getting the first reasonable clues as the result of the investigation as to who may have been responsible. So we're going to start this World News tonight with a report from ABC's Brian Ross.
Peter, the investigation is moving with great speed, with new developments even as we speak at this hour. FBI agents are dusting for prints at the Dulles airport. They've carried out a search warrant at a boarding house in Hollywood, Florida. And in Germany, police in Hamburg are active tonight. From Boston to Florida, heavily armed FBI agents and local police moved quickly and forcefully today to investigate what the Attorney General called acts of war.
The Department of Justice has undertaken perhaps the most massive and intensive investigation ever conducted in America.
As at this hotel in Boston, agents were looking for evidence of the terrorist movements and seeking to unravel what was an elaborate network that operated undetected for more than a year before yesterday's coordinated attacks.
The 4 planes were hijacked by between 3 and 6 individuals per plane, using knives and box cutters, and in some cases making bomb threats.
Starting last night, the FBI seized a car left at the Boston airport that led them to the identity of one of the estimated 12 terrorist hijackers, an Egyptian national by the name of Mohammed Atta.
We also have identified through a number of leads, principally at the cities of origin, a number of individuals whom we believe may have had something to do with the hijackings, and we are pursuing those leads aggressively.
By this morning, agents were at a small airport in Venice, Florida, where Atta and an accomplice took flying lessons and earned private pilot's licenses in the summer of 2000. A fellow student said the two had lots of money and kept to themselves.
They were talking about flying for a private company like Richmond and stuff like that.
The 2 men stayed at a nearby house where they were remembered as rude and unlikable.
Very sarcastic, and it gave me the impression that they didn't really care that highly for ladies or whoever, and that's about it.
Also today, authorities were tracking another set of 6 hijackers who were believed to have entered the country from Canada at a small border crossing in Jackman, Maine. The men are then believed to have flown into Boston on commuter flights yesterday morning from Bangor and Portland, Maine, with the thought of clearing security at the smaller airports instead of Boston.
Each one was carrying some type of small shoulder bag, not a real bulky one, but something small. Both kind of dark-complected, dark hair.
Peter, there are dozens of leads FBI agents are working on. No one has been arrested, but several people have been detained for questioning. By one estimate, as many as 50 people may have been involved in helping provide the network for the terrorists to operate in this country over the last year. Peter?
I watched Brian Ross, who's been working on the investigation. I don't think anybody's been working harder on this investigation than John Miller has, who has been with us day and night on this. So take this and enlarge it or add to it as you will in terms of what we really think is going on today.
Well, the roundup, and I don't mean the roundup of people, the roundup of what's going on in the investigation, 3 are being held in Boston. We'll get back to them. 3 were arrested or detained. There are some semantics here. From a train in Providence, Rhode Island, being held on immigration charges.
This is where Amtrak was actually stopped and people were taken off and people were
Federal agents boarded the plane, identified these people and have detained them. FBI agents in Newark are looking for the trail of several men they believe who departed on that flight from Newark to San Francisco. So what you see is the FBI is assuming that there are 12 to 25 or 26 hijackers, depending on if each flight had 3 or 6, are presumed dead in the crashes. But they are seeing traces that there were other people, associates, support people left behind. Now, what they're doing is something they've done before. Right around the Millennium celebration, when they felt that there was an imminent attack, they used the immigration laws to sweep out through Boston, again, ironically, and other cities, and pick up people who were on their watch lists, who they had information and tips about. Today in Boston, you see this dramatic scene unfolding. A heavily armed Boston SWAT team entering the Westin Hotel just off Boylston Street in Copley Plaza. This came about when FBI agents followed the paper trail from that car at the airport, the car they believe the hijackers used, to a hotel. They were not expecting to find anyone in the hotel room. To their surprise, as they approached to conduct a search, 3 people came out of the room, 2 women and a man. They put them in custody to identify them, to question them, and ultimately they are also being detained on an immigration charge. Searched the room. What they found inside, no explosives, pamphlets, papers though, and they said hair dye, which they are suggesting may have been used by some of their suspects to change their appearance so that they wouldn't appear to be as they were described by hotel workers.
One of the things that seems to me to be a change from yesterday to today, we have this huge failure in intelligence yesterday knowing this was happening, but if everything we're getting today is reasonably solid, then the leaving of the trail by the perpetrators has enabled law enforcement to move pretty quickly.
I would say so, and what you see here is the things they learned in Florida, that they obtained pilot's licenses, that they went for higher grades of pilot license, some of the time invested here, that they left this car behind in Boston after having an argument, that they registered under the same name as the paper trail. Of course, suicide bombers are not generally concerned with the trail that they leave. They don't have to worry about being caught by the law. But what the law is hoping, the FBI and the intelligence community, is that they will get associates who had knowledge, who aided or abetted, and that from those people they'll glean a better look into who is really behind this. And that's why this is geared up with such energy now.
Thanks very much, John Miller, who has been with us throughout the day, will be with us throughout the evening. I think the most startling thing we heard today was that the White House, in the person of the president's spokesperson, said that the White House itself was actually a target of one of the groups of terrorists on one of the aircraft, and that takes us immediately to the White House and ABC's Terry Moran. Terry, there's that, and then we'll come in a minute to the president's visit to the Pentagon this afternoon. Start with the message that the White House might have been a target.
It was as clear as could be, Peter, because today Ari Fleischer at the briefing said that the White House in this investigation had developed what he called specific and credible information that the White House and Air Force One were intended targets. And then Ari Fleischer went on to say that this investigation had led them to believe that the plane that hit the Pentagon was actually originally intended to hit the White House. This opens a whole raft of questions, but let me take you back to those harrowing moments. About 34 hours ago, the White House was being evacuated. First, White House staffers told to leave the building in an orderly fashion, and then an agent coming in, we are told, and saying, no, just run, just get out. And you can see that people did exit the building very, very quickly. At this time, as the White House was being evacuated, the President of the United States was in Sarasota, Florida, and he took off from Sarasota, originally intending to come back to the Washington area, to Andrews Air Force Base. The plane was diverted to Barksdale Air Force Base outside of Shreveport in Louisiana. And the White House says Air Force One itself was a target. ABC's Ann Compton was on that flight. She said it flew at an unusually high altitude, 40,000 feet. When it landed in Shreveport, reporters on board were told not to let people know where they were. The president made a statement there and then took off for Nebraska. And while they were in the air, they were accompanied by fighter jets off of each wing. This dramatic evidence of the level of threat that the Secret Service and the military authorities believed that the president was under.
Now, Terry, as we talked a little earlier today, you pointed out that there isn't much other business being done at the White House today, and there hasn't been much else done in the Congress as well. But the president did want to go over to the Pentagon to express his sentiments to the people there, and he did so just a short while ago.
Yes, he did. In fact, he is still there, we are told. The president remains inside the building now. A little while ago, he went to the Pentagon and toured the damage and the destruction with Secretary Rumsfeld. He told the rescue workers who were assembled there that he was overwhelmed by the destruction that he saw. He told them that he was grateful to everybody who was working there heroically, as he said, to search and rescue if there was any rescue to be done. He also thanked Americans for giving blood in the numbers that they have. He said being there made him sad and made him angry. He said the United States will not be cowed by this act and that we will go on, echoing the kinds of comments he's made throughout. This was a visit that we are told he wanted to make in spite of what we are told are continuing concerns about the president's security.
Thank you very much, Terry Moran at the White House. We'll be back to you throughout the evening. Now let us turn to the two crime scenes themselves, the Pentagon and New York itself, but particularly New York, where everybody continues to believe that there has been a huge loss of life and nobody really wants to or is in a position to say so. But ABC's Diane Sawyer has been monitoring this and covering this all day long. Diane, what's the current situation and what has the day really been like?
Well, Peter, first let me tell you that I've come up here on this roof about 4 blocks from the World Trade Center because I want to talk first maybe about a purely symbolic casualty. I'm going to send you 2 postcards. Here is a postcard of the skyline of New York as everybody has known it up till 2 days ago. And here is a postcard of the skyline as it is now. I also heard down on the ground some worrying news. They are talking about 4 buildings now, 4 additional buildings in shaky condition. The one they're most worried about is the giant Millennium Hotel. We know that yesterday night the windows had all melted in it, and they're saying now it is in a worrying condition. If it should collapse, think of what it's going to add to the work of the rescue teams as they try to sift through all the debris. Earlier, I know you reported and you showed everybody what it was like here when the rest of World Trade Center Tower number 1 went down, that spiny metal cathedral that was standing and groaning last night when I went down there to see it. It collapsed. People were terrified. They were racing from the scene. And of course, as you said earlier, smoke is now just cascading over all of Manhattan, and there are health advisories about the asbestos, plastic, and smoke in the air. Now, the casualty figures that you have talked about, the grim ones, we have been calling, we have been searching. Here's all I can tell you at this point. 11,000 people reportedly at local hospitals. 2,000 of what they're calling the walking wounded ferried over to New Jersey for treatment there. We're talking about the 55 known dead in addition to the 266 who were on the planes. We keep calling and saying, do you have any sense at all how many people have been reported missing? No sense at all how many people have been reported missing, as now the 3,000 to 5,000 rescue workers, teams of dogs, metal detectors, sound detectors, people looking for just the sound of somebody scratching on metal are out there trying to find people still in the field. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to take you down on the field and show you some of these emotional stories from the rescue workers there. But I'll tell you, Peter, if you want another symbol, it was the police officer who was downstairs on the curb as I came up, head in his hands, tears in his eyes, and he just looked up and said, "It's just too tough." Peter?
Thanks very much, Diane Sawyer. And as Diane makes clear, we're going to go back to her before very long. Today at the Pentagon, the Secretary of Defense, Don Rumsfeld, said that earlier estimates, and these were estimates made by non-Pentagon officials, that up to 800 people had perished in the Pentagon, were too high. Let's try to get the Pentagon in perspective now. Here's ABC's John Yang.
Thank everybody. When the sun rose this morning, the firefighters and rescue workers were still on the job, just as they had been for nearly 24 hours.
There's a lot of steel, there's a lot of concrete, glass, wood, metal rebar that's protruding from the building. It's very warm outside. Those all added together with the destruction itself kind of heightens the situation inside.
They work 12-hour shifts, and the work is gruesome.
It's worse than they thought it was going to be. Stepping over things that they assume are bodies that they don't know for a fact because it's so dark on the inside.
The collapse of part of the Pentagon left about 100 military personnel missing, while the number of missing civilians is unknown. Officials hope the death toll will be much lower than the 800 projected yesterday.
From everything that we currently know, the estimate that's been widely reported is considerably high, and we certainly pray that that's the case.
Some stories of the missing have happy endings. Hospital officials called Michael Kurtz about his badly burned wife.
I came in teary-eyed. I didn't recognize my wife of 31 years.
Others are still waiting for answers. Herman Hallman's wife is among the missing.
Nobody could give me a direct, information. They said, call this hospital, call that hospital. These are the 5 hospitals that we took people to.
In the fraternity of fire and rescue workers, the men and women toiling here at the Pentagon also felt the loss of yesterday's attacks. They had often worked at disasters around the world, with the New York City firefighters and rescuers killed when the World Trade Center towers collapsed. The loss, they say, makes them redouble their efforts.
Our job is here and our job is now, so we continue to do that, if nothing else, to memorialize the greatness of these men and women that were killed yesterday.
It is a job that will only intensify in the coming days. John Yang, ABC News, the Pentagon.
And the president, of course, did see that flag because he was over at the Pentagon a short while ago and did see the flag which the firefighters had hung on the side of the building which he was going to visit. The Transportation Secretary said today that the government is going to allow very limited air travel to resume, and by this, Mr. Mineta means travelers whose flights were diverted during or immediately after the attacks in New York and in Washington may continue on their routes. But the country's air system is still very much in jeopardy. ABC's Lisa Stark, ABC's Lisa Stark covers aviation for us. Thanks very much, Lisa.
Well, Peter, we had hoped early in the day that sometime around noon Eastern time, the Federal Aviation Administration would reopen the nation's airspace. Airlines could start resuming some sort of scheduled service. As the day went on, it was clear that was not to be, that the security measures were simply not in place yet to allow that to happen. So as you've reported, as of tonight, we have only very limited air service here in the United States. Today, virtually the only planes moving were flights diverted from their original destinations, including some that had been forced to land in Canada. Other passengers at airports around the United States were told they were going nowhere. At Dallas-Fort Worth, there was frustration from passengers and airline employees.
It's been suspended by the FAA indefinitely. Now, indefinitely, maybe as tomorrow morning, it may be 2 weeks from now.
On a normal travel day, there are as many as 40,000 flights in the United States. On this day, as planes sat parked on the ground, many of the major airports were deserted. This was Los Angeles International. At Washington's National Airport, passengers were escorted in to collect luggage they had not been able to get yesterday. The delay in resuming air travel is due to stringent new security measures that airports and airlines must first put in place. They include an explosives check before airports reopen, no curbside check-in, ticketed passengers only allowed at the gates, a ban on all knives on planes, and planes will be thoroughly searched before passengers are allowed on board.
I know that all Americans want us to move as quickly and prudently as possible to return our national airspace system to normal. And we will, as soon as we can do so safely.
No doubt these security measures will lead to significant delays. Passengers will notice more uniformed officers, random identification checks, and restrictions on vehicles near the airport.
It's inconvenient, but nothing compared to what people in the East have gone through. So you gotta do what you gotta do.
I think everybody will embrace whatever new security mechanisms are put in place with a lot of welcome over the next month or two, but then they're going to get tired of it.
One airline told us it could be weeks before the air transportation system is truly up and running. And it is still very unclear when any regularly scheduled service will truly begin. It's supposed to begin tomorrow. Every airline has their own estimation of when that might be. Some airlines will resume those flights tonight, the flights that were diverted. Some will not even do so until tomorrow morning. So I would expect it will still be very chaotic tomorrow as the airlines and the FAA try to figure out how to get the system back up and running.
Thanks very much, Lisa Stark. Lisa Stark, who's in Seattle and has been stranded in Seattle ever since. To some people, this is an inconvenience. To some, it's a real business problem. And to others, it is a real catastrophe. Here's an example. The chief of transplant surgery at the University of Pittsburgh, Dr. John Fung, told us that they had a liver which was available for transplant that would have gone to a person in Philadelphia, but they couldn't fly from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia, which they needed that kind of speed in circumstances like this, and so the person who most needed it did not get it. Instead, they've used it on a patient in Pittsburgh who was not nearly as sick, and that's exactly the kind of thing in extremis that is happening as a result of the aviation system continuing to be locked down. Now, we've been very concerned and curious and mystified by what's been happening, or what happened, not ultimately, but in the process of United Flight 93, which was the 757 left Newark to go to San Francisco and ended up crashing in Pennsylvania. But ABC's Connie Chung has been talking to United Airlines today, and I think may have more. Connie?
Yes, Peter, I've also been talking to American Airlines representatives and mainly the families of victims who were involved in the hijackings of those families of victims who were on board those 4 planes that were hijacked. And what I have discovered is something that could be considered quite disturbing to many people. And that is that both airlines have offered immediately to the next of kin $25,000. Now, you may say this is a standard practice, but in these particular instances, both United Airlines and American Airlines are offering, right as they say, up front, automatically, as soon as they determine who the next of kin is, they send a letter with a check immediately to the family. The last time, what I was curious about was, when did this practice start? I mean, we've heard about settlements between the families of loved ones who become victims in airline crashes, but is this standard practice? Well, American Airlines got back to me on that question and said the first time that was ever done was just the previous incident. That was in June of 1999, a crash in Little Rock, Arkansas. Right at that time, apparently all the airlines began offering cash settlements up front. And prior to that, this practice had not occurred. One other question that I wanted to know was, is this $25,000 per victim? And it is. It is. If a family has more than one member who is killed in any of these incidents, it is upped beyond $25,000.
Connie, thanks very much, Connie Chung. It's clearly something we want to talk to in the future to United Airlines and American Airlines. Connie points out at the beginning that it's standard operating procedure for airlines at the moment. And no further comment on it at the moment. You can feel a measure of irritation in the air. There's no question about that, at the very least. But yesterday's attacks have generated an enormous and visceral anger at a lot of things around the country, most of all that the United States was vulnerable and that these terrorists managed to reach their objective. Here's ABC's Dean Reynolds in Chicago.
Judging from conversations across the country today, many people are angry and unwilling to wait long for an American retaliation.
Revenge. I want to get even.
This woman near Miami spoke for many.
Send out the F-15s, the F-16s, and go after them.
From St. Louis,
I think we should bomb them back. I really do.
Where the Gateway Arch reopened, came a call for action.
The people should be angry that these terrorists are protected by other countries around the world.
It will be hard to pinpoint a culprit, but many Americans, like this immigrant from Lebanon, said that was no excuse for delay.
They know who's behind all this. They know what countries supporting all these people. They give them money, they give them weapons, they give them everything.
A stranded flyer in Wichita was not interested in a measured response.
They need to find out whoever did this, and they need to clean their clock. I mean, into the Stone Age. This is ridiculous. This does not happen in the United States.
In Columbus, Ohio, it was all about stature.
They keep pushing us around like this. We're the #1 nation, and let's do something about it.
And in Los Angeles, a woman said anything short of a violent response would be useless.
No, I don't feel vengeance, but I think the enemy's got to be eradicated. And you cannot talk with the enemy. You can't rationalize when all they want to do is kill.
For commuters in Chicago, there was no stomach for restraint.
I feel that if we need to have a full-scale war, then we should go ahead and do it. We should at least let them know that the United States isn't going to tolerate this.
I think these people, whoever did it, and I have no idea who did it, are a bunch of cowards. And I would love to face them face to face and tell them that they're a bunch of cowards.
A Palestinian worshiper at a downtown mosque supported the president.
President Bush should go after who's doing this and who's harboring them.
But as she dropped her young children off at school this morning, one mother touched on the difficulty a tough response would face.
Can we take out 1 or 2 people and be done with it? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think it's a cultural thing, and you can't eradicate an entire culture.
Elected officials across the country continue to call for calm, and some, including Illinois Governor George Ryan, are warning people not to take matters into their own hands. Ryan issued that warning in light of reports that several mosques in this area have received threatening phone calls. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, Chicago.
Thank you, Dean. As the mayor of New York said, there's no accounting for prejudice and bigotry at a time like this, and people's passions have boiled over, and so has their prejudice and bigotry on occasion. And that mayor, the mayor of Chicago, local and state officials all across the country have quite sensibly reminded people that terrorism is not automatically associated with Islam. At any rate, the president went over to the Pentagon a short while ago. You heard Terry Moran talk about that, and here's a brief excerpt of what he had to say when he was overseeing people there.
Coming here makes me sad on the one hand. It also makes me angry. And our country will, however, not be cowed by terrorists.
Mr. Bush said earlier today, when he was having a cabinet meeting earlier, I just want to check precisely on my notes, he urged the country to be patient and to be resolved, and made it clear, as did the Secretary of State, that there was going to be any retaliation until they found out who it was that they intended to retaliate against. And it will be made particularly more complicated if, as many senior officials have said, it is discovered that a government is involved or complicit in this in any way. But the United States undoubtedly has the capacity to respond. And now we're going to go to the Pentagon, and our Pentagon correspondent, who's worked very long hours, John McCarthy. John.
Peter, it should come as no surprise that planners in this building and elsewhere within the military complex are hard at work drawing up an entire menu for a military response. The U.S. already has the firepower in the region to strike many targets simultaneously. Planes on land and aboard 2 aircraft carriers, long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles on other ships and submarines. And there are also ground troops that could be used in a more extreme response. It is not the firepower that is in question. It is the choice of targets. Who or what would the U.S. hit? How massive would the strikes be? And would an American response inflict real pain, crippling future attempts at terrorism, or would it just make the U.S. feel better? Secretary of State Colin Powell says the response must be broad-based.
It's not just a matter of going after the perpetrators, but it's going after and dealing with the sources of support that they have.
Say that doesn't mean to me that one just selects a facility or so here and there and puts a few cruise missiles on it in the middle of the night. That's we're way past that. We suffered an attack like Pearl Harbor yesterday. Someone is at war with us.
But too harsh a response, one that takes the lives of many innocent civilians, could easily backfire, with the U.S. losing the moral high ground.
We have to be careful to shape our response so that perception remains and so that we don't overnight be seen in some quarters as an aggressor.
Defense Secretary Rumsfeld today seemed to suggest whatever the U.S. does will not happen soon.
Anyone who thinks it's easy is wrong. I think that it will require a sustained and broadly based effort.
And the administration today began working on that broad-based response. Part of what they're doing is requesting an unusual level of support from NATO, Peter. They are asking not that the NATO allies would actually participate in any military action, but they want broad and very vocal public support from the European allies.
Jack, before I go on to talk about the U.S. and the rest of the world, the fire at the Pentagon today, which we talked about this morning, is it still burning?
It is finally out, Peter, and they are finally in the process of sending in search and rescue people to remove what they expect are going to be only bodies.
Okay, thank you very much, John McWethy at the Pentagon this evening. At his news conference earlier today, the Secretary of State, Mr. Powell, said that the U.S. expected the fullest cooperation from Pakistan in gathering information about these attacks on the United States. Pakistan, of course, is right next door to Afghanistan, and we know that Afghanistan has been a refuge for Osama bin Laden, and we also know that Pakistan itself harbors or has many supporters of Osama bin Laden, and there is a strain of militant extremism there. That's a redundancy, I realize. There's a strain of extremism there which worries the United States about stability in the region in general. ABC's Bob Woodruff is in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, tonight. Bob, do we know precisely what the United States has been telling the military leadership in Pakistan today?
We don't know precisely, Peter, but we do know that for the last 2 days there have been high-level diplomatic talks going on both in Washington and here in Islamabad regarding Pakistan's potential cooperation with the United States. You can assume that at a minimum it would be to share intelligence on Osama bin Laden's organization and possibly also to talk about military cooperation. As the focus on bin Laden hardens, there is a lot of anticipation that there may be a U.S. retaliation in this region, not so much here in Pakistan, of course, but in Afghanistan. In fact, in Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, the aid workers at the United Nations have completely cleared out. The rest of them will actually leave later on today. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning here on Thursday. They have paid off their local staff, and they've taken with them many of the documents and computer disks. Meantime, there is a lot of diplomatic ducks being put in a row here. The brand new U.S. ambassador to Pakistan will be meeting with the president of ambassador to Pakistan will be meeting with the president of Pakistan, General Pervez Musharraf, later on today, on Thursday. That's tomorrow, your time, to talk more about this cooperation. But again, the Taliban has condemned this so far, and they said there will be no talk about any kind of extradition or move against bin Laden until the U.S. comes forward with some evidence that he may actually be involved in this.
Well, I think everybody agrees everywhere about that, Bob. The question is for Pakistan at the moment. It's a pretty unstable nation, and there is deep support in the country for acts of terrorism against the West in some elements of the Pakistani society. Is there any reason to think that Pakistan can be brought firmly onto the side of the United States in this?
Well, there is some talk about possibly giving some extra support or aid to Pakistan to try to get that over. Also, and a very interesting thing, I talked to a government minister today in Pakistan, and he said Look, the World Trade Center was a very different kind of thing. This was a very international target. And they say that there were about 1,200 to 1,500 Pakistani nationals inside the building when it was attacked, inside those buildings. So again, there's reason now for the Pakistani government to be more sympathetic to the United States in this attack than other types of terrorist actions. So whether there are militants here in Pakistan that would support generally an attack against the United States is one question, but in this particular strike, would they support it or would they be more sympathetic to the United States?
Okay, thanks very much, Bob Woodruff in Pakistan tonight. We're going to stay overseas. There's trauma and there is rage and there is anxiety in the region as a whole, just as there is in the United States tonight. Around the world, people have been reacting in very different ways to this. But leaders certainly throughout the Arab world have expressed their sympathy and their condolences. The Palestinian President Yasser Arafat actually donated blood today for the victims. And one of the Palestinians' leading spokesmen, Hanan Ashrawi, very familiar to Americans, expressed her condolences. And so did the Iranian President Khatami. President Khatami expressed his condolences today. There's a whole network of complicated relationships being tested in the region and throughout the world this evening. Now, there are several reasons, it can be argued, which may have contributed to this attack against the United States by extremists and terrorists on this occasion, and ABC's Jim Wooten picks up that dimension of the story.
This is the president's explanation for what happened yesterday.
America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world.
America may be exactly that, but that is not why a few Muslims would murder so many Americans or why others would applaud their crime. In fact, the U.S. is a target because many Arabs see the U.S. as an accomplice of Israel, a partner in what they believe is the ruthless repression of Palestinian aspirations for land and independence.
Many in the Arab world regard the United States not as an honest broker, but protecting and shielding Israel over very important political as well as religious issues.
The most provocative issues? Israel's control over Islamic holy sites in Jerusalem, the stationing of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia near some of Islam's holiest sites, and economic sanctions against Iraq, which are seen to deprive children there of medicine and food. But perhaps nothing has been more infuriating to many Arabs as Israel's recent attacks on Palestinian militants, using American-built helicopters as gunships, prompting this kind of Arab response today.
Of course, I'm sorry for the civilians, for everything, but that's the price for everything they did, the states. I mean, the states had to pay the price for the suffering of the whole world.
That rationale may seem irrational, but it is an explanation for yesterday's madness shared by many Arabs in the Middle East and elsewhere. It explains nothing and everything. Jim Wooten, ABC News, London.
Well, this is not an easy time to be an Arab American or to be an American who happens to be a Muslim. In Dallas overnight, shots were fired at a Texas Islamic center, and Muslims who attend the center fear that it was indeed a backlash after the attacks yesterday. Windows were shot out of the center, which includes a mosque and an Islamic school. And it's just inevitable, one supposes, that at a time like this, many Arab Americans and many Muslims feel themselves very much on the defensive and in many cases threatened. ABC's John Donvan reports from Detroit, which has one of the largest Arab and one of the largest Muslim communities in the country.
An attack, a fireball, a death toll in the thousands, and it is predictable, it is normal, it is human that as Americans we want to get even. But get even with whom? When the news pretty consistently suggests the ethnicity of the terrorists.
At least 5 suspects identified as Arab men.
And when the pictures come in showing Arabs in the Middle East celebrating our sorrow, some Americans jump to conclusions and begin to make threats against fellow Americans. Detroit, the offices of the Arab American News, that's Arab American. The phone has been ringing there.
I hope every Arab big-born son of a bitch dies.
Washington State, a town called Shoreline, where apparently a number of people actually scoured the yellow pages for companies with the word Arabic in the name and found this, Arabic language and translation.
It's time for you pigs to get get out of the country.
And who is Arabic language and translation? A woman who moved here from Lebanon, a Christian by the way, 32 years ago to become an American.
I just got emails from my friend, and she is 2 or 3 saying that they're afraid their kids are at school and what's going to happen to their kids.
And then there are some of the postings to our own ABC News message board. The Muslims are a bunch of savages that should be nuked off the face of the earth. The Islamic way of life, their nations, their culture must be eradicated. We should deport them and make it illegal for Arabs to live here until terrorism is completely eliminated. And if you're an American who is a Muslim, or say anyone else of Middle Eastern appearance, how are you supposed to feel? Osama Sablani edits that Detroit newspaper.
We are part of America, and we are part of the victims, not of the perpetuators.
But you could hear it yesterday when New York City's mayor spoke, concerned that Arab Americans could become targets of an unfocused anger.
Nobody should blame any group of people or any nationality or any ethnic group.
Any cop in America will tell you immigrants from Middle Eastern countries are as law-abiding as anyone. They have unusually strong family values. They mostly vote Republican. But Oklahoma City happened in 1995, and they all felt like suspects. Now the World Trade Center, and they feel like it's happening again. The principle at work is called guilt by association.
Not everybody sitting there on their couch in the living room is very smart to distinguish between Osama bin Laden and Osama Sablani. And that is scaring the hell out of us in here.
In fact, Muslims have been giving blood along with everyone else these last 2 days. Abroad, moderate Arab leaders have been expressing sympathy.
Now you have to pick yourself up, as difficult as that is, dust yourself off and take the fight back to them again.
And presumably, Americans who are Muslims will be burying family members who, side by side with fellow Americans, went to work yesterday and died, like everyone else, as victims of terrorism. John Donvan, ABC News, Washington.
And now, for reasons we do not fully understand, the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, has decided to make a second appearance today at the Justice Department to talk to the news media and to the country, one presumes. He did appear earlier today and gave us an update on the investigation. Maybe that is just what he wants to do again. ABC's Pierre Thomas has managed to get back to Washington today from New York. Not a great many people did that with great ease, Pierre, but do you have any sense of what Mr. Ashcroft has on his mind at the moment?
Well, I think he wants to continue to assure the American people that the investigation is unfolding very quickly, that they have leads that they're following, that they are pursuing people who are associated with the people who carried out this particular attack. Peter, we're told that at least 3 people who are associated, friends and or family of those who carried out the attacks, are being held. They're being held on various immigration charges, also state charges. Again, no charges specific to these attacks, but they're being held in order to gather information. The hope is that some of these people will cooperate.
As you get back there and talk to your sources at the FBI and elsewhere in the Justice Department, are they content with the pace of the investigation today?
Well, again, on one front, they're frustrated. For example, they cannot begin looking at the crime scenes, doing the forensic work that they want to do. However, the flight manifest yesterday gave them leads. They are actively pursuing these suspects. And again, the fact that they know most of the identities of the attackers, they think, is very critical and is allowing them to expand the investigation.
Okay, thanks very much, Pierre. The Attorney General has joined us. Now, Mr. Ashcroft, I apologize. I thought you were going to come and make a public appearance at again, as you did earlier today. I had no idea that you and I were going to have an opportunity to talk, but I'm grateful for it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to keep you while I'm talking to Pierre Thomas, asking him whether you're content with the pace of the investigation. Let me ask you directly. Are you content? That's not the right word. Are you okay with the pace of the investigation today and what you revealed so far?
Well, we've been able to mobilize quite a group of investigators, about 4,000 special agents of the FBI, 3,000 support personnel. We have specially trained individuals, scientists, lab technicians, and the like, additional 1,000 that are available. We have all of the field offices of the FBI that are activated here, and we're pursuing about a couple thousand leads, some more promising than others, and obviously those are important. So we have gotten this up and running. We've developed crime scenes at each of the places where the airplanes impacted the ground. The FBI has been in charge of those scenes to put out grids so that we can collect the kind of forensic evidence that'll be appropriate to our investigation. So we've made a really good start, and we're going to keep working on this, and we're going to do everything possible. No more significant or substantial investigation has ever been launched in this country.
Now, have you arrested people? Have you detained people? Have you simply questioned people? There's some confusion about that.
Well, there are no arrests to my knowledge. There have been people who have been detained, and I wouldn't want to comment on specific incidents, but the fact of the matter is, if there's anything that supports arrests or detentions that are valuable to us in developing an understanding of who's responsible and who provided some of the ground support for this situation, then we'll take that action.
Let me just focus on one of the pieces of information which you did share with the public earlier today. You said you discovered that some people, some of the individuals on board the aircraft, had been trained as pilots in the United States, which implies that they had some measure of control when those planes finally did what they did. Can you be more specific with what you actually mean in terms of that part of the investigation?
Well, obviously, for an individual to target an airplane and to target it successfully on a building, or to land it as it was landed virtually in the side of the Pentagon, these are individuals who have skills. These are individuals who are not someone who decided they'd like to take over an airplane. And I believe that skill is from pilot training, and there's some significant evidence to that effect.
Do you believe, sir, or do you have evidence to support Mr. Fleischer's statement of the White House today that the White House was specifically a target?
Our government has information, credible information, that the White House and Air Force One were targeted.
And do clarify this for us. Was the White House a target for the aircraft which ultimately crashed into the Pentagon?
I'm not able to comment further on the nature of any evidence related to that. I would just say that we have evidence that the White House and Air Force One were targeted.
But Mr. Fleischer did say that the aircraft which crashed into the Pentagon today was actually had as its original target the White House, or was it also a target? I think that's what's unclear to people.
Well, I'm prepared to say that we have credible evidence in this government that indicates that the White House and Air Force One were targets, and to go further would not be appropriate.
Okay, and finally, sir, do you have evidence which you have compiled in the wake of these attacks which links Osama bin Laden to these operations in any way, shape, or form?
We're not in a position to make an attribution of specific responsibility at this time. We're still pursuing a number of leads, over 2,000 of them. And when we have an appropriate assemblage of evidence and we feel like an announcement should be made, we would make it then.
Do you believe, sir, one more question, I apologize, do you believe that the discussion that's been held in the public arena today about your investigation in any way distracts from your investigation or has been anything other than realistic?
Well, I'm not party to the discussion myself. I've been working hard on the investigation, but I think it's entirely appropriate for the public to discuss the investigation, to understand the event, and we'll certainly do what we can to cooperate with the public. The public providing leads to us and cooperating with us are an essential component of our investigation's success.
In this I meant to include, of course, the public and the press. And do you approve of the discussion that's been held in the media today?
Well, one of the things that we want to fight to preserve in America is the freedom of the press. Those who would seek to destroy America and our freedoms make an assault on our liberty to discuss things openly, both in the press as individuals. And with that in mind, I don't criticize the press for making its discussions. When it wants me to answer a question which I should not answer, I'm simply going to say I don't believe I should answer that question.
As I have carefully noted. Thank you very much. The Attorney General of the United States, John Ashcroft, this evening, giving us his views of the state of the investigation and how much he wants to say about it at this particular moment. So let's move on to the impact that this has had on the economy, both in the short term, certainly in the medium term, and perhaps in the long term. For a briefing on that, we're joined again by our business and economics correspondent, Betsy Stark. I apologize, I get you and Lisa mixed up sometimes.
Well, let me start today with the very near term, Peter. One big question today was when would U.S. stock markets reopen? And the answer we got this afternoon was no later than Monday, no earlier than Friday. This would still make it the longest stretch of time the market has ever been closed. Market officials said financial firms need time to recover, rescuers need room to work, and the delay will also give emotions time to cool. Businesses around the country were open today, but it was not business as usual. Some stores opened late. The Limited cited security precautions, and many retailers reported fewer customers than usual.
It's not a regular Wednesday for us, and it's kind of a gloomy type of atmosphere right now.
The manager of this bookstore in Chicago says customers are in no mood to shop.
I think today people, the first day back after being at home all day yesterday watching television, everyone's sort of in a state of shock.
In Los Angeles, Universal Studios reported fewer visitors to its theme park. Midway Airlines, already in deep financial trouble, said the slowdown in air traffic would put the company and its 1,700 workers out of business. Some economists believe Tuesday's attack will push a fragile economy into a full-blown recession.
We have been performing a high wire act, and I think it has become even more perilous.
Others believe the chilling effects of Tuesday's attack will be temporary, that as the rescue mission becomes a rebuilding effort, spending will pick up, and so will consumer sentiment.
This event actually has some stimulative effects to it because this is a country that rebuilds.
For businesses at Ground Zero, the focus is on the human toll. Among the tenants in the World Trade Center, Bank of America has accounted for most of its 400 workers, insurer Marsh & McLennan for several hundred of its 1,700 workers, and in a video message to employees this morning, the CEO of Morgan Stanley, the largest tenant in the Twin Towers, said most of its 3,500 workers got out safely.
The reason they did is they started evacuating World Trade Center 2 immediately upon hearing about the terrorist attack on World Trade Center 1.
The firm now wants customers to know that despite the devastation, their assets and records are safe.
What the clients need is all of you calling the clients, talking to them, giving them reassurance.
Morgan Stanley and other Wall Street firms developed sophisticated backup systems after the World Trade Center bombing of 1993.
Most of these firms run what are called hot backup sites. That is a place that's running real time somewhere else in the world, often across the river in New Jersey, where the systems are running in parallel with those main systems.
Well, interesting to note that overseas markets in Europe and Latin America, which sold off sharply yesterday, traded higher today, and after losses yesterday, the dollar rebounded. The economy is showing some resilience. Investors are showing some faith after an understandably emotional reaction yesterday, Peter.
I was slightly distracted, which I hope you'll understand. Did you mention travel and tourism as a percentage of the economy there today?
Not as a percentage of the economy, but tourism was absolutely down today, whether you measure it by theme parks or by traveling about.
There's some figures which suggest that travel and tourism account for about 3.5% of the economy. That's a $35 trillion business. So that contributes more bad news to the general state of the economy overall, particularly if the air travel ban continues.
That's right. When the airlines aren't flying, that's a big blow, both in terms of business travelers and tourists.
Okay, many thanks, Betsy Stark. And now we want to go back to Diane Sawyer, who is in lower Manhattan, or as low in Manhattan as you're allowed to get at this moment, and at least to the crime scene itself. And Diane, when we last left you...
Lost my IFB. I lost my sound to you, yeah.
Okay,
if you can hear me, Peter, I'm going to go ahead and just tell you what is happening down here. Part of it may be the fact that we have all this activity down here. I want to show you the smoke behind me. We've got a billowing cloud coming toward us. I mentioned earlier that they were worried about some 4 buildings being wobbly. Well, it seems that one of them, which is One Liberty Plaza, which is the Merrill Lynch building, it is a 54-story building, is in the process of collapsing. It, of course, has been long since evacuated, but they were saying earlier that it was listing degree by degree by degree, and it seems quite clear now that that building is going down. And as we said, there may be several others. that right now are having trouble and that they're watching every single minute. Needless to say, again, that this makes a huge, huge and even more complicating difficulty for the rescue teams out there. We were just saying around here, why does it take a devastating act of evil to remind you how powerful goodness really is? And if you want to see courage, you're going to see it now on the faces of those rescue workers going in the grime and the sweat. They are insisting that they be allowed to go back in, even though this can happen any minute, and there is danger absolutely everywhere.
Someone said courage is just fear that has said its prayers. Like the courage of firefighters and search and rescue teams digging, shoveling, sifting through 200,000 tons of pulverized steel, trying to find bodies.
I walked through the rubble looking for my buddies that I know were missing. I walked through the entire rubble and didn't find anybody.
It was basically one big rubble of metal and concrete. Trying to hear someone call out.
We're with the men of Engine 24 who have worked almost sleeplessly since yesterday. They are looking for their brothers, their friends from Company Ladder 5. Their pictures still smile down from the wall.
Words can't describe how I feel about those guys. Just praying and hoping to get some of our guys back.
But there's a grim discovery. The twisted hulk of a truck. It is from Ladder 5.
It's such a disaster that you don't think about yourself anymore, you know? Just don't even, just keep moving, you know? It's like God gives you the strength to get through it.
Every success keeps them going. This morning, some of the emergency services team who helped rescue a police officer buried up to his chest in heavy metal. They got intravenous help to him and medication, sustaining him through the night. And all through the city, mothers, fathers, children, fiancés. Some of them walked miles to get here because so much of the city is closed. They carry photos, willing themselves to keep hoping.
I'm just going to keep going. I'm not going to lose hope, and I'm going to go as long as I have to until I find it, because I know he's going to come back to me.
I've been going to different hospitals, leaving them on poles and trucks, and I left one on your truck, and you got in touch with me. I appreciate that. And we've been in hospitals all day since yesterday, so if anybody could help us, there he is again, Sean.
Back in the rubble, another rescue. 2 workers from the Port Authority. Buried for close to 24 hours, they called out, and they were heard.
We got one out alive about 1 o'clock this morning, and then we got another one out about 5:30 this morning.
Reinforcements are on the way from as far away as California, and from Indiana, from Pennsylvania, gathering at the Jacob Javits Convention Center this afternoon to get briefed on how to take up some of the burden. Already here, 53 search and rescue dogs who've been flown in from as far away as Puerto Rico, trained to the scent of a human. The rescue teams also have listening devices that can hear a murmur, a scratch, a thump. They will be moving out all night, moving carefully, like people who know what real urgency is. Every second, someone might still be breathing. Maybe someone whose life can be saved by one weary man.
So, Peter, I'm going to leave this spot now and head back down into the street and try to get up to the scene if I can, because believe me, there is a story every inch as you move that way, and we want to start feeding them back to you. So I'll be going now from here.
Thanks very much, Diane Sawyer, who is in Lower Manhattan tonight. There are a couple. We all misspeak, I'm sure, on a variety of occasions. Diane wanted to point out that she did misspeak earlier. Local hospitals in New York are not filled with 11,000 people, rather 1,100 people. In case you noticed that, she wanted us to be sure that we corrected that. And there is some question now about the status of One Liberty Plaza, this building to which she refers in the darkness, which is very hard because it has been near collapse, as we pointed out through much of the afternoon. And we're not absolutely certain that despite reports on the wire services that it has collapsed, that it actually did collapse. So that particular element of the crisis, and it is still a crisis in Lower Manhattan, is still very much on hold. Life in the country, in so many ways, is on hold. Here's ABC's Aaron Hayes.
There were, early on, unsettling signs that maybe Americans were not handling this so well.
Never again will I buy anything from you.
Greed and panic set in. Gas prices in many cities rocketed to nearly $5 a gallon.
We're being held siege by the terrorists in New York who are flying airplanes into the World Trade Center, and we're being held hostage by oil terrorists in our own country.
This morning, though, priorities were being pushed back into place by Americans in no mood to give terrorists the satisfaction of seeing the nation come apart.
There is absolutely no reason for a doubling or tripling of prices at the pump.
Their intention was to break us up as a country, and I think it's not going to happen.
You need to have a photo ID. As testament, crowds of people flooded into blood donation centers in Georgia, Illinois, Texas, everywhere.
We've never seen anything like this, so we're not sure how many to expect.
All patiently waiting to help.
Part of my own personal sense of duty requires me to be here.
This is all I can do, so I do this.
I'm just amazed at how we've come together. And proud to be an American.
Coming together in ways we didn't expect. With every airport now a ghost town, stranded travelers, millions of them, like these in a Dallas bus station, faced unpredictable days.
36-hour bus ride to Philadelphia, and then I'll figure out bus or train from Philly into New York.
And behaved as stranded travelers rarely do, with grace.
This is small compared to what occurred, so.
There were efforts today to get back to the business of the country. Shops closed yesterday, opened today, but things were not really back to normal.
Mostly I feel like I'm walking around this mall in mourning.
I can't quit crying. I was fine yesterday.
In many cities today, there were indications of our heightened anxiety. Bomb scares, police on the lookout, and on edge.
There's a noticeable increase in police presence down here.
And we as a nation were still riveted to this, sorting out in our own minds what to do.
My feelings on yesterday are simply summed up in one word, and that is prayer.
It is just now really sinking in.
It just hurts. I don't know any of the people, and I don't know anyone in New York, but they're my brothers and sisters.
It's just terrible. My emotions are from one end of the scale to the other constantly, and I wish I could back up time.
Don't we all? Aaron Hayes, ABC News, Atlanta.
Just want to try to get some clarity into this business of Liberty Plaza. Liberty Plaza is an important building. It's 54 stories. It is right in this immediate area. It is right at the, on the edge of the financial district here in the city, and it has been in difficulty all day. And there has been some obvious concern that it was going to collapse. It has been evacuated. That's the important thing, I think, to know. But if it does collapse, as we have just been told by Jerry Hauer, who helped to set up the Emergency Management Administration in New York City, it'll have a tremendous impact on the search and rescue operation down there. And that's why we are so focused on it at the moment. It has a number of clients in the building, but the most important thing is that if it does finally collapse, or may have collapsed, that's what we're trying to find out, then indeed it will have a significant impact on the search and rescue operation. So let's go back to the streets of New York one more time to ABC's Bill Blakemore. Bill.
Peter, I spoke with Fire Captain Bill Bukowski. He told me a short while ago that they were very worried about number 1 Liberty Plaza. They have a number of scientists who are keeping surveyors' spy glasses on the buildings to watch that they don't move too much to one side or the other. And when they begin to see a little bit of movement, they're expanding what they call the collapse zone. They've done that now in the area around Liberty Plaza, as we understand it, and they're worried about 3 or 4 other buildings nearby. So whenever that happens, they get the fire and the rescue workers back out further out into a larger perimeter, and of course it slows down their work.
Okay, Bill, thanks very much. Bill Blakemore, who is in Lower Manhattan trying to give an extra measure of clarity to what's happening to 1 Liberty Plaza. New York City has such extraordinary energy, and those of us who are here notice 2 things about it. We notice many things about it today. One is the extraordinary effort being made by people to help. The other is the turmoil, organized turmoil in many ways, that continues at the foot of the city on the western side of the island of Manhattan. And in far more general terms, wherever else you go in the city, how this otherwise among the noisiest cities in the world is so quiet. Here's ABC's James Walker.
In lower Manhattan today, New Yorkers continue to evacuate their homes.
The wind has changed, so the smoke is coming over our house. We sealed up our house, but it stinks, and so we're leaving. We're just getting out.
Throughout the city, residents struggled with the incomprehensible loss.
It's very, very kind of eerily quiet. You know, there's no energy, there's no activity. You know, very few people, relatively speaking, on the streets.
Times Square, which on any other day hosts 1.5 million visitors, today was virtually empty.
I need to get a bus upstate New York.
Okay, it's closed.
This is 8th Avenue at the corner of 40th Street. Ordinarily, there'd be gridlock here. Nothing would be moving. Over there would be dozens of taxicabs waiting to pick up hundreds of thousands of commuters who use the Port Authority building every day to go back and forth from New Jersey. Today, it's closed.
Manhattan, which is an island, was never more one today. It was cut off to the outside. Bridges, tunnels, and major highways were closed.
The advice that I would give to people today, if they're home from work, is to go about a normal day. Take the day as an opportunity to go shopping, be with your children, do things, get out, don't feel locked in.
That's a tall order right now.
It's very serene, it's very quiet, you know, people are serious. This is a really serious thing that's happening. What can you say about it, really?
Many businesses were shut, Broadway shows were canceled, and schools and colleges did not open.
You can feel kind of like fear in the air.
It's
just like disbelief.
And it's quiet, but people are more like reaching out to each other, you can tell.
Reaching out for support, because everyone feels the loss. James Walker, ABC News, New York.
And there is no doubt that night changes the psychology of the rescue operation here and the city itself. They've brought in lights from all of the adjacent sites, though there's no shortage of light, but they're enveloped not only in the darkness now, but in this increasing sense of desperation that the hope people had earlier for finding survivors has to some extent diminished, and that will be compounded if it turns out that another building has actually collapsed on top of the rubble. We've talked to any number of people today who've managed to get close, and this is particularly true of the emergency medical service people who went in full of hope that they were going to make a difference and have come out, in the case of one surgeon who went in there earlier today, has come out just deeply dispirited. And we are constantly reminded of the words of the mayor himself, Rudolph Giuliani, who has said many times when asked about the casualty count in this particular part of town, it is going to be more than we can bear. But one Liberty player, Jerry Howard, thank you very much for joining us, who's here this evening, has not collapsed. All debris and removal and search operations have stopped around it at this moment. It is certainly in danger of collapse, as we have said earlier today. But as Jerry Howard, who helped to set up the emergency management office in this part of town, which is no more and was no more after the attack yesterday, one of the cruel and strange ironies about this, that the preparations were among the place for the preparations, the place for organization was one of the first places to be wiped out, is not anymore. But the search for survivors goes on, and we do indeed find them. Here's ABC's Juju Chang.
This is a story of a young woman who lived through not one, but two of the nation's worst acts of terror.
I said, Mom, this is Jennifer. Something's happened in the World Trade Center. It just happened. You don't know about it yet, but I'm okay. I'm leaving the building now.
Jennifer Ruth was at her desk early yesterday in the American Express building, just a few dozen feet from the North Tower. She didn't realize it at the time, but she had actually seen the first plane hit.
At that point, it looked as though I saw the end of something going into the building, at which time I had no idea what it was. Nothing was logical. It didn't make sense what I was seeing.
Slowly, almost casually, she and a handful of co-workers left the building. Once outside, she looked up and saw another jet overhead.
We saw the plane flying through the air, and it didn't even strike me that that plane is going to hit the other building until it did. When that second plane approached, it looked like Independence Day, you know, where they explode the bottom of Manhattan. It was the exact same thing.
Suddenly, she felt like a target. She started sprinting and didn't stop for 15 blocks.
And I remember approaching or passing one woman who walks out of her building and walks immediately to the middle of the highway and looks up and says, "My husband's in there," and collapses immediately right there on the road. Then Oklahoma hit my mind, and are there trucks in the vicinity?
The Oklahoma City bombing came to mind because in 1995, when she was just 17, Jennifer lived through the shockwaves of the Murrah building attack. When Timothy McVeigh's truck bomb exploded, people she knew were trapped and killed.
And the infamous shot of him walking out of the courthouse in an orange jumper, it was one of the few times that people actually saw him in daylight. And I was standing there and I saw it, saw him come out. In situations like that, I think everyone grasps to make it real. They know it's real, but they can't get over that brink of it not being real. And so you grasp to be close to it so that you can go ahead and make it real.
Two of our nation's worst terrorist acts hit close to Jennifer Ruth, and both times she's been lucky enough to walk away.
Today I turned 24.
Today?
Yeah. Quite a birthday. Yeah, it's my birthday.
Young woman with some reason to smile, though it's been hugely frustrating for people. It's hugely frustrating for people all over the country to try to find out more. And we want to be in a position to tell you more, and I think the various levels of government do as well. But what we find, among other things, is that the telephone lines are jammed very often. The cell phone interconnections were absolutely jammed yesterday, and people couldn't get through. We've had any number of frustrated, often desperate emails from people today who just simply can't get through even to answer a question. On the other hand, the cell phone technology has provided a window for several 911 calls from the crisis here and from the ill-fated airplanes. And that in itself is a dimension of technology we hadn't encountered before. Here's ABC's David Wright.
38-year-old Tom Burnett was headed home to the Bay Area from a business trip to New York on United Flight 93. Using his cell phone, he called his wife in California and told her that 3 men had taken control of the plane.
His adrenaline was going, he was not whispering, he was talking quickly, and he was ready to do something.
It was the first of 3 phone calls Dina Burnett would receive from the plane. Her husband, an executive at a Bay Area pharmaceutical company, described how the terrorists had stabbed to death one person on board and were threatening to detonate a bomb. She told him about the attack on the World Trade Center.
He was fighting to come home. He had every intention of being here that night.
United Flight 93 was headed from Newark to San Francisco, but the hijackers diverted it in the direction of Washington, D.C. The plane never reached its target. It crashed in western Pennsylvania, and Dina Burnett is convinced her husband is one reason why.
I pleaded with him to please sit down and not draw attention to himself. And he said, no, if they're going to run this into the ground, we're going to have to do something.
Last night at St. Isidore's Catholic Church in Danville, California, family and friends gathered in his memory.
I draw comfort from the fact that I know he didn't go down by giving up. He certainly went down fighting.
But the couple's 3 children, ages 5 and 3, are having a tough time understanding why their daddy isn't home yet.
They asked if he was in heaven, and I said yes. And that they asked if he could talk to them on his cell phone.
At least 45 people died aboard Flight 93, including Tom Burnett. But had that plane ever reached its intended target, the death toll could have been much higher. David Wright, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Let's go to Washington very briefly at the moment, because we knew there was going to be a prayer vigil on Capitol Hill tonight, and indeed it has begun. Members of the House and the Senate, that's the Speaker of the House there on the left, and from the beginning of today, the chaplain in both the House and the Senate have made very powerful spiritual commitment to the members of the Congress and to the country as a whole. So let's just listen for a moment.
Bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariot with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted on the earth. The God of Jacob is our refuge. The Lord is with us. The word of the Lord. Amen.
The Senate chaplain speaking for the second time today to members of the House and the Senate. And seeing those familiar faces there is, of course, one more reminder that in so many cases today there are victims of this incident, of this attack on the United States, who we know, who all of us know, or at least a great many of us know. Here's ABC's Jackie Judd.
We stand together tonight, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as citizens of the world, as Americans, as brothers and sisters with pain and with hurt. We are a circle of trust that cannot be broken. We are one people. We are one family. We are one nation. Tonight we pray for those who are not here to pray for themselves. Let us all bow our heads in prayer. Oh God, we come to thee tonight with heavy hearts. We need you now. We call on you because we know that you are a powerful and mighty God. We need you in this hour. We need your healing power. We ask tonight for you to look down on us. Please, God, look down on America. Look down on New York. Look down on Washington. We ask your blessing be upon the President of the United States, the leaders of the Congress, and all of the members. God, if you will, bless all of our people. We ask, oh God, in a very special way for you to be with the families and the loved ones of the victims at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and with the families of those who perished in Pennsylvania. We pray tonight for the firefighters, the police officers, the doctors, the nurses, and all of the emergency medical personnel. We pray, O Lord, for our entire nation in this time of tremendous grief and despair. We call on you tonight, dear Lord, because there's no one else for us to call on. We turn to you tonight, for there's no one else for us to turn to in our hour of need. We ask that you continue to watch over America and shed thy grace on thee. We need thy help, O God, now, right now, more than ever before. Hear our prayer. We stand in need of your presence, O God. We are your people. We are your children. We are hurting. Our people are hurting. Our nation is hurting. Help us, O God. See us through this storm and hold us in the palm of your powerful hands. Tonight, dear God, let there be peace in our world, peace in America, and peace in our hearts and soul. Oh God, we just want to do your will. Give us the strength. Give us the courage to be faithful to your calling. This is our quest. This is our plea. This is our hope. Oh God, this is our prayer. Amen.
Hurting, he makes so clear.
At 4 a.m. this morning, I was awakened by the stench of smoke from the fire still burning a mile away at the Pentagon. It made me feel sick and powerless, a feeling shared by many today. Only by turning to God Almighty will we have the wisdom and the strength we need in this great trial. Without God's Spirit dwelling within us, we are powerless. It is He from whom we derive all strength to console, to endure, to overcome evil, and to maintain our humanity in the faith of unfathomable inhumanity. And how do we gain this power? Only by asking God for His help. By opening our hearts can we receive God's grace and His all-powerful Spirit. God spoke in Jeremiah, "Call to me, and I will answer you, and show you great and mighty things which you do not know." God can show us the way, if we will but ask. We cannot explain what's happened. We don't have that capacity. Then how can we console those who've suffered so much through the loss of friends and loved ones? Yes, our hearts go out to them, but it's not enough for them or for us. The message again is to turn to God. He alone has the answers.
That is Senator John Kyle of Arizona there at the prayer vigil in New York, and we've clearly lost the feed to the Capitol building, a prayer vigil which the House and the Senate agreed they would hold tonight, held in the rotunda, as you could probably see. And not the end of the day, by any means, for the members of the House and the members of the Senate, or for any of the members of the political leadership in the country, but certainly a fitting end to the formal day in the U.S. Capitol today, where not too long ago, Senator Tom Daschle, the Democratic leader in the Senate, told us members still do, in some ways, feel vulnerable, as people do in many parts of the country. And our coverage of this is going to continue on ABC News throughout the night. But to end this rather unusually lengthy edition of World News Tonight, let us first and finally on this segment of the broadcast, provide you with some of the sights and the sounds of the day here and everywhere.
Got a lot of heavy debris. We're really just on top of the pile. We can't even, there's just a lot of crevices and holes, things you can look down into. You really can't see. The visibility is real poor. A lot of smoke, a lot of heat coming off of the debris.
Here's my son with my little granddaughter.
My son is Lloyd Rosenberg. He worked for Cantor Fitzgerald in Tower 1 on the 102nd floor. And I'm begging the people that would know anything, please get in touch with me.
We just have in our head that he's unconscious. His ID is
down in smoke right now, I guess, right? And that he's somewhere in a hospital unconscious or on Liberty Island. I mean, I refuse at this point to give up.
Found 2 Port Authority workers were trapped. We got one out alive about 1 o'clock this morning, and then we got another one out about 5:30 this morning.
Any more regulators? Got any more regulators? Non-rebreathers? I know 2 tanks.
The damage is incalculable, but you know, one human life is worth more than all that damage put together.
We've been in hospitals all day since yesterday, so if anybody could help us, there he is again. Sean.
He started yesterday to work.
Yesterday was his first day back.
Yeah, first day. And he don't come back no more to the house.
You know, we still have hope for them, but if they were up in the building with the size of that fall and fire and the smoke, it doesn't look good for them.
And this building's unstable. It was unstable. Go guys, come on. You're right.
Need the dogs here.
Walk it out of here. Guys, coming over.
Well, I said that final collection of images from the day would be here, there, and everywhere. And of course, what I should have said was here in New York City and there at the Pentagon outside Washington, and of course at the crash site in Pennsylvania. That is here for everybody in the United States today. I hope in the last hour of this special edition of World News Tonight we've been able to summarize the events of the day and bring you up to date with the investigation, with America's connections with the rest of the world, with the search which continues in New York and at the Pentagon as well. And at all 3 of those crime seats and in other places around the country, all of the investigative agencies of the United States are at work. And as you heard in the course of the last hour and you've heard today, there has been some progress made in identifying the terrorists on board the aircraft.